I've been reading about happiness for some time. I've been reading a book, listening to a few lectures, reading about the concept of happiness, the philosophy of happiness. And in that process, I've also been reading about what triggers or causes unhappiness. I was actually looking at very actionable advice or help on achieving happiness and avoiding unhappiness. In the process of reading more about avoiding unhappiness, I realized that there are a few emotions or behaviors that lead to unhappiness. Some of those behaviors would be fear, discontentment, or disappointment. That led me to think more about what causes these behaviors or what leads to these emotions in us. And one common theme that stood out was failure. Then I decided to talk about failure and this thought that I had in my mind with some of my friends and mentors who I consider to be very successful in their lives. I realized that a lot of these successful friends of mine processed failure very differently than most other people that I would interact with. I realized that most of them thought of failure as one of the best opportunities for them to learn and get better. I found it very interesting. And then I started reading more about people that have failed but overcame from their failure and had really great comebacks. I've been a fan of a few sports ever since I was a kid. One of the early sports I was introduced to was cricket. I've also been a fan of Formula One racing ever since I was in high school. I'm also fond of watching mixed martial arts, specifically the UFC. And I've been fortunate enough to have watched or rewatched many of the basketball games or some NFL games and a lot of soccer games. I thought, what if I were to compile some of the stories about failures and comebacks from some of the athletes that I have always been inspired by and share with all of you today. So, this is what we're going to do. I've kind of knit together a few stories of legends of sports athletes from across the globe that have seen or taken failure as an opportunity and come back like none other. So join me in this journey as I walk you through the story. Imagine this: you're standing on the edge of a precipice, the wind howling, your heart pounding like a drum. You've trained for years, sacrificed everything. You sacrificed sleep, you sacrificed friendships. You sacrificed your own body to watch it all crumble in a single devastating moment. I've been through few of such moments in my life. One such was me having prepared for an exam that I did not do well. I did terrible. That devastated me for months. We've all been there, right? Whether you're chasing a promotion, building a business, or just trying to be a better parent, that gut wrenching feeling of failure is something we all know. But what if I told you that failure isn't the end? What if it's a spark that ignites the greatest comebacks? Today, I want to take you on a short journey across the globe, weaving together the tales of extraordinary athletes who stare into the abyss of failure and emerge stronger, wiser, and victorious. These aren't just sports stories, they are human stories of resilience and the unyielding spirit that binds us all. I hope you'll leave here today seeing your own failures not as scars, but as stepping stones to your next triumph. Let's begin with the perilous tracks of 1970s Formula One racing, where one man's fiery crash became a symbol of indomitable will. I've titled the story as the Phoenix Rises. Andreas Nicholas Lauda, famously known as Nicky Lauda, an Austrian who defied his wealthy family to race, faced his ultimate test on August 1st, 1976. Leading the championship in his Ferrari, crashed and burned and burst into flames, trapping him in the wreckage. He was pulled from the inferno with severe burns and lung damage, also given last rites by a priest. Doctors doubted he would ever survive, let alone race again. But just 42 days later, Lauda returned. He finished fourth at the Italian Grand Prix, his face still scarred, his fear still palpable. Though he lost the 1976 title by a single point, he came back to win it all in 1977, the very next year, and again in 1984, cementing his legacy with three world championships. Nicky's comeback wasn't just physical, it was a triumph of the mind over unimaginable trauma. Nicky Lauda put it best. He said, "From success, you learn absolutely nothing. From failure and setbacks, conclusions can be drawn." He learned that his greatest lessons came from the crash and not the checkered flag. Lauda's story teaches us that our greatest lessons come from the crashes. That takes us to our next story. What about a different kind of a crash? The kind that happens to your confidence and your ego. I've titled the next story as The Air Up There. Some of you have probably guessed who I'm going to talk about next. None other than the legend, Michael Jordan. Crossing miles and miles to the vibrant courts of 1970s America, we meet a phenom who turned rejection into royalty. Michael Jordan from Wilmington, North Carolina, wasn't always Air Jordan. As a high school sophomore in 1978, he was cut from his varsity basketball team, a devastating failure that left him in tears. Deemed too short and unskilled, Jordan used that rejection as motivation, growing taller and honing his game relentlessly. Jordan would say later, "I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. I have failed over and over and over again in my life. And that is why I succeed." That wasn't just a quote, it was his philosophy. Jordan embraced failure as his greatest teacher, leading the Chicago Bulls to six NBA championships and becoming an icon. Our next story is about physical failure. Sometimes failure is physical and sometimes it's emotional. But what happens when the failure comes from within your own body? Our next story is about one of my most favorite mixed martial artists, none other than the legendary Brock Lesnar. I would like to title the story as The Beast Incarnate. Let's shift to a brutal cage of mixed martial arts with the story, where a beast of a man is faced with an adversary he couldn't simply overpower: his own body. Brock Lesnar, a powerhouse who had already conquered collegiate wrestling and WWE, claimed the UFC Heavyweight Championship in 2008. But failure struck hard in 2009 with a severe intestinal disorder that required a surgery and sidelined him for nearly a year. He was an athlete at the peak of his power, unfortunately brought to his knees by an invisible enemy, his own body. Yet he returned triumphantly, avenging a loss and defending his title. Though he would eventually retire from MMA after more health issues, his comebacks proved something very profound. As he once reflected, "You've got to learn to lose to learn to win." Brock's health struggles forced him to reinvent his trainings and his life, teaching him that even a legendary beast must heal to roar again. Brock Lesnar's journey shows us that resilience is not just about withstanding physical pain, but about healing and reinventing yourself. In our next story, we're going to talk about failure of a different kind. Sometimes failure is also about being constantly overlooked. I've titled the next story as The Finisher's Fire. This is a story of one of my most favorite all time cricketers, none other than Dinesh Karthik. Now let's travel to the passionate world of Indian cricket, where one man's career was a constant roller coaster of some successes and a lot of failures. Dinesh Karthik was repeatedly dropped from the Indian cricket team, every time overshadowed by some new star and criticized for inconsistent form. By 2017, he seemed finished, a forgotten figure in sport. Yet, Karthik refused to quit. He reinvented himself, mastering the art of the finisher. In the 2018 Nidlas Trophy final, with his team needing a boundary to win on the final ball, guess what? He smashed a six to clinch an impossible victory. You must look this up. The last few moments of the game. Then, at the age of 37, after more years away from the team, he had actually switched to become a cricket commentator. Later, again at 37, his explosive performances earned him a spot in the T20 World Cup squad. He came back in the domestic Indian Premier League, proving that a comeback isn't a one time event, it's a way of life. It's a way of life for Dinesh Karthik. Karthik's perspective on this was don't fear failure, embrace it as a stepping stone to success. His journey shows us that being dropped doesn't mean you're out. It means you're just getting started on your next act. Having said that, Karthik, in my opinion, is also an amazing commentator. I have been so inspired by Dinesh Karthik, and I wish him all the best for the future. So, what's the common thread here? Failure isn't a period at the end of a sentence, it's a comma, it's a pause, it's a chance to take a breath and write the next chapter. Lauda's crash led to championships. Jordan's rejections led to six rings. Lesnar's illness led to indomitable returns. Karthik's repeated drops led to dramatic last ball victories. These athletes teach us a universal truth. Perseverance turns pain into power, and growth blooms from grief. So, what's your failure? The job that you lost? The relationship that ended? The dream you deferred? I want to take this challenge on myself, and I want to encourage you to take this challenge as well. Embrace it. Don't hide from it. Analyze failure like Lauda. Learn from it like Jordan. Fight through it like Lesnar. And reinvent yourself like Karthik. Today, I want to make a commitment to myself, and I hope you do it for yourself as well. Commit to one small action. Journal your last setback, identify the lesson it taught you, and take a single step forward because the arena awaits and your comeback story is just beginning to happen. I hope you enjoyed the story and you also found some motivation from it. Thank you so much for patiently listening to this video. And if you liked it, feel free to subscribe to Simply Awesome People. Thank you so much and wish you all the best.